Pay-per-meeting models, best practices for deals. Why pay-per-meeting is surging in 2025. Pay-per-meeting, PPM, offers are everywhere because they promise pipeline on tap without the fixed costs of hiring. On paper, paying $300 to $600 for a qualified B2B appointment can feel safer than committing to salaries, tools, data, and management overhead. But the same simplicity that makes PPM attractive is what makes it easy to get wrong. In practice, PPM only works when incentives match outcomes. Your team needs qualified opportunities, while many vendors default to optimizing for volume. If meeting is loosely defined, you can end up with calendar clutter that burns AE time and erodes trust in outbound. That's why we treat PPM like a structured vendor relationship, not a shortcut. At SalesHive, we see the best results when companies pair outcome-based pricing with rigorous qualification, CRM visibility, and multi-channel execution. The goal isn't to buy booked calls, it's to buy conversations that reliably convert to pipeline and revenue. When PPM is run with that standard, it can be a powerful lever alongside a cold calling agency, a cold email agency, or a broader outbound sales agency strategy. The unit economics. Compare PPM to in-house and retainer models. Before you negotiate any pay-per-meeting lead generation deal, calculate your real internal cost per meeting. A fully loaded in-house SDR can cost $9,800 to $14,200 per month, which works out to roughly $821 to $1,150 per qualified meeting if they deliver 10 to 14 meetings monthly. Once you include benefits, tools, data, and management time, cheap internal meetings often don't exist. That's why many revenue leaders use PPM to de-risk early tests, especially when they don't want to hire SDRs or build an outsourced sales team immediately. In the market, outsourced SDR programs commonly cite $250 to $600 per meeting, while broader appointment-setting benchmarks often land in the $300 to $600 range for qualified B2B appointments. The catch is that costs and quality swing widely depending on ICP complexity, seniority, and how qualified is defined. A clean way to make the comparison is to align pricing to outcomes and control. Retainers can win on long-run cost per meeting at higher volume, while PPM can win on speed, flexibility, and lower fixed risk, if your contract prevents low-quality bookings. Here's a practical snapshot most teams can use to frame the decision: when PPM makes sense and when it doesn't. PPM shines when your offer has enough margin to support per-meeting pricing and your ICP is well-defined. One practical benchmark. Meeting-based pricing is often recommended when ACV is above roughly $25,000 because a few $100s per qualified conversation is small relative to deal value. That's especially true when you're testing a new territory, segment, or positioning and you need fast signal without long-term headcount commitments. PPM is a weaker fit when your motion depends on deep multi-threading, heavy technical validation, or long committee-driven buying cycles where one meeting rarely maps to one opportunity. It also breaks down when your product competes in crowded markets and vendors promise unrealistic volume because outreach performance has real constraints. For example, the average cold email reply rate is around 5.8%, which means list quality, deliverability, and relevance matter more than catchy guarantees. The decision should be made with math, not hype. Take your historic conversion from meeting to opportunity to closed won, multiply by ACV, and then decide what you can afford per qualified, held meeting while still hitting ROI. If you can't articulate that ceiling, you'll either overpay for pipeline that doesn't convert or underinvest and never get a real test. Define qualified, held meeting like you mean it. Most PPM failures come from vague language in the statement of work. If qualified isn't written down in operational detail, you'll eventually argue about titles, company size, geography, use cases, and whether the prospect was actually a decision maker. The fix is a one-page definition that is specific enough for an SDR agency, internal or external, to execute without interpretation. Your definition should cover firmographics, industry, size, territory, tech stack, persona requirements, seniority and functions that count, and disqualifiers, roles, segments, and scenarios that do not count. It should also include meeting mechanics, minimum duration, required attendees, and what held means. If a meeting is scheduled but the prospect no-shows, you should not be paying full freight unless a rebook happens within a defined window. This is where strong sales outsourcing partners differentiate themselves. They'll welcome tight definitions because it protects both sides and reduces churn. At SalesHive, we prefer definitions that can be audited in the CRM and verified with call recordings because it keeps the focus on outcomes rather than opinions. When your outbound partner is held to measurable criteria, quality becomes the only path to getting paid. If meeting isn't defined with the same precision as revenue, you're not buying pipeline, you're buying calendar invites. Negotiate win-win deal terms that prevent gaming. PPM isn't just a pricing model, it's an incentive system. If your vendor can get paid for any booked slot, they'll naturally optimize for the easiest bookings, not the right conversations. To keep incentives aligned, tie payment to qualified and held, and specify a replacement policy for cancellations and no-shows that's fair and enforceable. When you move beyond a small pilot, pure PPM can get expensive, especially at 20-plus meetings per month. That's where a hybrid structure often performs better. A modest base funds consistent execution, data, deliverability, calling time, LinkedIn outreach services, and a lower per-meeting fee keeps performance accountability. The best providers usually prefer this because it gives them room to do the work the right way instead of racing to produce volume at any cost. Anchor negotiations to your internal CPM and downstream conversion targets, not to what a vendor claims is standard. If your internal engine is already effectively producing meetings below the market's $300 to $600 band, the vendor must offer speed, quality, or a new segment you can't efficiently reach in-house. If your true internal CPM is closer to $821 to $1,150, a well-run PPM deal can be rational even when the sticker price feels high. Protect meeting quality and avoid the most common mistakes. The first mistake is choosing the cheapest vendor and judging performance only by cost per meeting. Ultra-low rates often correlate with weak qualification, questionable data sourcing, and minimal personalization. So your AEs spend time on calls that never had a chance. A better evaluation is cost per opportunity and cost per closed one, because that's what your CFO will ultimately care about. The second mistake is letting the vendor own all the data and conversations. If lists, messaging tests, and campaign performance stay in a black box, you lose institutional learning and you can't build compounding advantage across quarters. Require CRM syncing, campaign attribution, and regular exports of account lists and messaging so your B2B sales agency partners are contributing to your long-term system, not renting you a short-term result. The third mistake is ignoring downstream conversion and scaling too fast. A vendor can hit the number on meetings while your opportunity rate collapses, and you won't see it unless you track meeting to opportunity and opportunity to close by source. Start with a capped pilot, often 60 to 90 days, or a fixed meeting maximum. Define success metrics and only scale when the quality and AE capacity are proven. Use multi-channel outbound and AI to tilt the odds. In 2025, email-only outbound is rarely enough, especially in competitive categories. Multi-channel campaigns that combine email with other channels, like LinkedIn and calling, can see up to 287% higher engagement and 300% more conversions versus email-only approaches. That's why any serious PPM provider should operate like a complete sales development agency, not just a sender of sequences. Cold calling still matters because it creates real-time signal and accelerates learning. When we run cold calling services alongside email and social touches, we can quickly validate whether messaging resonates, whether the ICP is reachable, and whether objections are consistent. If a vendor claims to be a cold calling company, but can't explain how calling, email, and LinkedIn reinforce each other, you're likely buying disjointed activity rather than an integrated outbound engine. AI is now table stakes for both productivity and quality control. Research shows AI deployments in sales can lift win rates by 30% plus, and sales pros using AI daily are about 2x more likely to exceed targets. In PPM engagements, that should translate to better targeting, smarter personalization, and faster filtering of bad fit accounts before they ever hit your calendar. A practical next step plan for predictable PPM results. Start by running the math and writing the rules. Compute your internal cost per meeting using fully loaded SDR costs, then apply your historic conversion rates and ACV to set a realistic ceiling for what you can pay per qualified held meeting. Put your qualified held meeting definition into the contract as an exhibit so it's enforceable, not just a shared understanding. Next, build the operational feedback loop so your vendor can improve rather than guess. Ensure meetings auto-sync into your CRM with source fields. Require outcome reporting, held, no-show, disqualified, opportunity created, revenue closed, and review call recordings so messaging and qualification are calibrated. If you don't have that visibility, you're not managing a performance channel, you're buying a black box. Finally, pilot with constraints and scale with proof. Cap initial volume and spend, set success thresholds like a minimum opportunity rate, and only expand once the numbers support it. Whether you're working with an SDR agency, an outsourced sales team, or a specialized partner like SalesHive, the teams that win treat pay-per-meeting lead generation as an iterative system. Measure, refine, and scale what converts.